I'm going to do my best to keep us on track with time and to make sure that, we utilize the hour that we've set aside to the best of our ability. And I do want to really genuinely thank everyone for prioritizing this call in an extremely busy time of the year. So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. This is so exciting. This has been many months in the making, and so it's really great to see everyone or see everyone's little phone icon for our first phone call as an official USC committee. So my name is Viraj Patel. I'm really excited to chair this year's committee. And, oh, sorry, I have a lot of dings going off. I'm going to turn off a few things. And so, yeah, why don't we dive right in? I really am not super comfortable with doing a lot of talking and talking at folks, and conference calls are a little rough, but we're in this together. Why don't we start with a check-in, and then I'm also wondering if someone can help out with taking notes during the call in the Google Doc that I sent out. Is anyone available to help with that?
I can.
Sorry, who was that?
It was Amber.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Amber. All right. So I had sent out in the email that I sent out this morning, I had included a link to our committee call agenda. I had accidentally uploaded an old PowerPoint, so that link that I put in the original email may not work. But if you'd like to follow along with the PowerPoint, I put in the updated link in the agenda itself. And thank you, Amber, for taking notes. So maybe we want to do a round of introductions as well as which committee folks are on. And I will maybe just lead folks in that because everyone's screen looks a little different. So Amber, did you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Amber. I'm the small group committee chair, and I've been involved with the undergraduate student conference. This is going on my third year now, and then I attended it as an undergrad as well, so that would count as 4 years that I have been doing. And I currently work at Hofstra University as a resident director.
Thank you. Colleen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Colleen Doherty, and I am one of your NASPA staff liaisons. I am the Recruitment, Engagement, and Volunteerism Coordinator with NASPA. You'll have 3 NASPA staff members joining us on many of these calls. Myself, Danny Anzovetto, who is the Associate Director for Recruitment, Engagement, and Volunteerism, and who unfortunately couldn't make it today, and Alicia Montague, who is our staff liaison to our AC, or our annual conference, planning core team. And I'll let Alicia talk a little bit about herself. Oh, and I use she, her, hers pronouns.
Hi everyone, I use she, her, hers pronouns as well. My name is Alicia Montague. I'm the meetings manager here at NASPA. I'll be working very closely with Colleen and the rest of the NASPA staff and you all, just to make sure your event runs as smooth as possible. My main duties will be just making sure you all have the space, the tables that's needed, food and beverage, and any on-site meeting logistics.
Thanks, Alicia. Next, Sean.
Sorry, hi, I was trying to solve a problem in the corner. But I am Sean. I am on the small groups committee. I currently work at FIU as an assistant director, and I've been a part of the undergraduate student conference now for my 3rd year. So.
Thank you. Morgan? Oh, I think your speaker, you might be muted. Thanks.
How about now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. Hi, sorry for chiming in a little late. I am Morgan Russell. Right now, I am serving as the Disability Services Coordinator at Eastern Virginia Medical School. I will be transitioning in the next few weeks to a new position as Associate Director of Multicultural Affairs at the University of Richmond.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Jimmy.
Hi everyone, my name is Jimmy Doan. I am the Assistant Dean for Education and Prevention at MIT in Cambridge. I'm very excited to be joining you all on this year's committee. I'm actually winding down my tenure with my involvement in the USC and serving this year as the outgoing conference chair. So.
Sad. Shishay, how about you?
Hi everyone, my name is Shishay Sang and I am a program coordinator for the Cross-Cultural Center and Civic Engagement Initiative at Chapman University in Southern California. This is my pronouns are she, her, and this is my first time on this committee, but I've been in that for forever, and I'm on the Assessment and Technology Committee.
Great. Jesus?
Hey y'all, my name is Jesus. I'm currently a resident hall director at Texas State University down in San Marcos, Texas. I'll be serving in the marketing and recruitment and registration committee, and it's my first NASPA committee, but I've been a NASPA ever since my undergrad. Did NUF, DLI, and GAP, and everything in between. So excited.
Thank you. Sophie?
Hi everyone, my name is Sophie Barra. Sorry, it's a little dark here. I use she, her pronouns. I am a program coordinator for student engagement, also at FIU. I'm in the Educational Sessions Committee. This is my first time joining the USC committee, but I was also a NUF fellow. I actually did BLI with Jesus, so I'm excited to see him again. And yeah, very excited to be working with you.
Great. Roman.
Hi everyone, my name is Roman Christians. I use they, them, theirs pronouns, and I'm an assistant director at the Spectrum LGBTQ Center at the University of Michigan. This is my first time being on the committee. I'm working with the Small Groups Facilitation Committee, but I was enough in 2009 to 2011, which feels a long time ago. Did FLI, so that's what it was called at the time. So I'm excited to get back into enough stuff.
Gavin.
Hey y'all, I'm Gavin Weiser. I use Z here pronouns. I'm an assistant professor in our college student personnel program at Illinois State University. And this is my first formal NASPA committee.
Great. Jasmine?
Hi, I'm Jasmine Williams. I'm a resident director at Tulane University. I work with the committee, on the committee for 3 years. This is my 4th year working with the committee, period. She, hers pronouns. Sorry, I missed the rest of what we're supposed to say.
I think if you have like past involvement with the committee, what your role is this year.
Oh yeah, I work under the Small Groups Committee and previously Assessments Committee. I'm a small group facilitator. And this year I'll be working with the marketing committee as the committee chair. Marketing, recruitment, and registration.
Daniel.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Hanna, and I'm the assistant director at the Asian American Center at Cornell. I use the pronouns he, him, his, and this is my first year helping out the undergraduate student conference on the marketing, recruitment, and registration committee.
Wonderful. Did I miss anyone? Oh, I'm so sorry about the lighting in my office, everyone. I will figure that out next time. But again, really excited to work with everyone this year. This is a true powerhouse team. And I think we're going to have an amazing conference at the end of, in March, in just a few short months. It'll be here before we know it. Let's see. Colleen, is there a way to show the PowerPoint in the Ring Central meeting, or should we just sort of follow along on our computers?
I can share my screen with the
Oh, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Give me one moment while I pull it up in such a way that it is easily viewable.
Yeah.
Rather than just like looking at little slides.
Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm. We will coordinate that in the future. That's on me. So to introduce myself a little bit more, again, my name is Viraj Patel. My pronouns are she and hers. I am currently, I actually just started in a new position as a House Dean at the University of Pennsylvania, located in Philly. Prior to that, I served, I've worked in multicultural affairs, done a little bit with off-campus student affairs and student programs, residence life. And along with all of that, I have also served, I was a NUF fellow, completed DLI, and when I was a student, I got to attend, at that time, what was the NASPA Undergraduate Pre-Conference, and is now the Undergraduate Student Conference. And I have served on the committee for the last 2 years, very excited to return in this capacity. Moving into the PowerPoint, thanks, Colleen. I'll go through our committee structure. So on the next slide, we have a list of our full committee members. Unfortunately, you know, it's August, so there are a few folks that couldn't make the call, but just to guide us through the structure of our committee is myself as chair, Colleen, Daniel, and I will add Alicia, my apologies for that. Jimmy, oh, I'm so sorry, I misspelled your name. Anyway, Jimmy, as the outgoing conference chair, serve as the leadership team. And then along with that, we have 4 different committees, which you heard on the call. So we have representation from all committees today, which is great. For marketing, recruitment, and registration, we have Jasmine, who's the committee chair, along with Jesus and Daniel. Under small group facilitation is Amber, working with Sean and Roman. Educational sessions is Jason, who couldn't be on the call today, but he is the chair. And then Sophie, Gavin, and Morgan. And then for assessment is Andrew, who also was pulled into a meeting working with Nee and Shishay. So we have a wonderful committee. Our committee, I wanted to share with everyone that this year we received a record number of applications. We got almost 60 applications for about 15 spots. 14 spots. So it was definitely a very competitive process, but your applications all stood out because you talked about teamwork. I wanted to build a team that had experience both on the committee, but could bring in different outside experiences as well. Folks who have attended the conference, folks who haven't, but mostly had a focus on really building an inclusive space, a space that challenged, I think, a lot of preconceptions about what a career in higher ed and student affairs can look like, and had a real vision to create and execute a conference and a passion for that team building. So I'm so excited to work with all of you on this. We have grown as a committee in the last few years for sure, and this year we had added 2 new committee members as well. So a large committee, but it's for a large task. And as Jimmy said in the past, work smarter, not harder. So we have a great committee to work with. Can we go to the next slide? So our charge as a committee is to plan a meaningful standalone experience for undergrad students to start or further explore their interest in and understanding of higher ed and student affairs. I want to highlight the piece about the standalone conference. Our committee started, or the undergraduate student conference started in 2007 as the pre-conference, as a pre-conference session attached to the national conference for NASPA Undergraduate Fellows Program participants, or NUF Fellows. And that was right around the time that I did it, actually. So in 2008, which I believe is the year that I went, or 2009, the NUF Pre-Con became a full day event. So it kind of grew from a half day into a full day program, but again, specifically for students participating in the NUF program. In 2009, there was some reflection because there was a low turnout. And we realized that, you know, it might be because we were only targeting to NUF Fellows, and that really there's many other students who are interested in higher ed and student affairs. And so we wanted to grow the program. In 2010, the conference became open to all undergrad students. And then in 2011, we went off-site from the NASPA conference, and has really developed into a 2.5 day or like 2 day conference that the vision for that now is that it is a standalone experience. So not something that's essentially tied to the conference happening. It just happens to occur right before the NASPA annual conference starts. And that vision for it being a standalone conference experience came out of reflections from the committee last year. Is there anything that anyone wants to add to this, or anything that you think would be important to highlight about the history of the conference? Any questions anyone has? Okay. So a couple things I want to highlight in addition. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, for my involvement within the last 4 years, like, the volunteers have looked very different as far as, like, now we have more and more each year. I think previously the small group groups were committee members who led those groups, and now it looks a little bit different where we can tap into volunteers who are professionals in student affairs higher ed to use their knowledge and lead those groups. So that's something that I've seen that's really cool.
Yes, we have experienced significant growth in the last few years. That's a great point.
Viraj, if I can add one thing, you know, I'm a NUF alum myself, and I attended this conference when it was a NUF only conference. I think having seen the conference grow over the past, few years, and thinking about, how a lot of us introduce ourselves and our involvement with NUF, I think holding on to that experience and being very mindful of how that, positively impacted our experiences, but also really recognizing that a good number of our students who do attend this conference aren't NUF fellows. And Colleen and Lucy, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to the organizational changes at NASPA, where NUF isn't, connected directly to educational programs anymore, but just being mindful that this is very much so an experience for all undergrad students. And, I think Viraj will toss this in a little bit, but thinking about how we kind of bring in all undergraduate students who may not come from marginalized backgrounds as well, but also not forgetting that a large number of them are going to be NUF fellows.
Yeah, I would also, and the other caveat being that a lot of students with minoritized identities don't find out about the NUF program, and that they are still welcome to attend this conference too. But yeah, thank you, Jimmy. That was great. And then I know you had asked if Colleen or Alicia could also talk a little bit about the sort of organizational changes as well.
Absolutely. So especially within the last few years, I think, Viraj, you and Jasmine both did a good job of kind of talking a little bit about that, as NASPA has identified the different ways that we can engage with undergraduate students and making sure that we are fully engaging our undergraduate student members as well as undergraduate students who are interested in the field and providing opportunities for engagement with those folks. Providing this conference as well as other opportunities has become more and more important, but at the same time, as everyone has noted, making sure to not forget about the historical context of this conference and making sure to provide spaces and opportunities for our NUF students, and making sure that this still continues to reflect that history. Especially, I do especially appreciate you, Viraj, noting that a lot of students may not have an opportunity to either become a NUF on their campus, or their campus may not have that representation. And so making sure to engage those campuses as well, and those students on those campuses in ways that are meaningful, and that we're really being able to provide good opportunities for growth and development for all of our students, because at the end of the day, that's kind of why all of us are in this field, right?
Definitely. Thank you so much. Going back to the committee charge, so that leads actually really well into the second committee charge, is thinking about what it means to build a community-centered space that takes into account undergraduate students' diverse identities, experience, and levels of interest in higher ed and student affairs. So my framing question for this is, how do we center students with marginalized identities in this process and move simply beyond inclusivity and build an aspirational sort of space that leads to transformation of our field? that is a big committee charge. And one that again, like when I reviewed applications for committees, I was looking for folks who were thinking about like, what does it mean to not reinforce a lot of our own heteronormative understandings of higher ed and student affairs, and where can we build in spaces to rethink what it means to welcome folks into our field. And that is going to be a framing question that I will continue to bring up as we go through this committee plan or the conference planning process. Number 3 is to build on historical context that's been successful, and that we should feel empowered as a committee to turn to a blank slate for fresh and new ideas, as well as recognize the work that's gone in the past. The undergraduate student conference is strong, and we are luckily in a place, because of the work of so many people before us, where we're really tweaking things and refining things, and that where there's space for new and fresh ideas, but we don't have to start completely from scratch each year. So that's a really great place to be in. And I'm really grateful for the folks that have put in the work before this year so that we're walking into as a strong structure already. And then I think Jimmy brought this up, so I won't reiterate it. I'm looking at our agenda where the conference isn't only for NUF fellows. We really want to think about how to make a space where all students feel welcome and not disconnected because they were not part of the NUF program. I included a few notes that I'm going to speed through really fast that I'm going to ask committee chairs to talk about on their calls with their committees in the next couple of weeks, just for the sake of time. So I threw in a few notes that the last year's committee had about last year's conference. I think we're in the process of doing some more soul searching about the purpose and identity of the conference, right? Is this sort of a general introduction to student affairs? Are we looking at it being more of a social justice institute or a leadership institute for current students? These are questions that I think have come up in the past and that we've grappled with because our population is so wide. And so I'm going to be looking to the committee to help with refining this vision, to think through how to meet the needs of our participants, recognizing that many of them are coming to attend the conference at great personal cost and commitment. So I think we have to think through how to build a diverse and flexible experience where students are able to leave feeling like they've gained some clarity about their career choices and that they've learned something about a career in higher ed and student affairs. Foundational assumptions around students already being involved. We do actually have a number of students that come and they're drawn to higher ed and student affairs because they felt very disconnected in their undergraduate experience. But maybe that was an assumption we were making in the past, that they were already highly involved students. And that we're thinking in the next month, we're going to be developing outcomes for the committee. So we need outcomes that consider higher ed as a profession. And that is something that we'll be talking a little bit more about in committees as well. Some other general feedback that I wanted to share is that in the past, students felt like we were asking them to do too much. I think we can unpack that a little bit as a committee because it is a conference experience, but how do we refine the schedule a little bit to feel manageable and not overwhelming, but still feel like productive? Yeah, I think I've covered the other things in that. So I feel like I'm talking a lot, so I'm sorry. Anything that anyone else wants to add to this section in terms of committee charge, feedback, things like that before we move on? Okay, thank you. Moving into the next part about committee and subcommittee overview, I put a link in the agenda to position descriptions. I'm going to ask everyone to just take a look at those and review them, and to please reach out first to your committee chair if you have questions, and then to me so that we can clarify. There's a few things that have shifted from the past, so if folks were involved in the past, most of it is the same, and then there's a couple of things that came up last year where we didn't really have a home for certain tasks that have been delegated to committees. But overall, we have a full committee. My hope and expectation is that this really feels like a strong team environment where folks are collaborating and communicating. Part of the fun of doing this is getting to meet and work with other people from around the country. And so my hope is that folks really do have a chance to build relationships with other people on the planning committee, within your small committee as well, but overall. The Marketing, Recruitment, and Registration Committee is responsible for developing marketing and recruitment materials, managing our online registration, as well as on-site registration and check-in processes. There is, all of these committees will have some overlapping components, so there will be a lot of collaboration between committees as well. So marketing, you would be working a lot also with like the NASPA central office on developing graphics and recruitment plans and things like that. Educational sessions, they'll be working as conference content creators, schedule planning, recruiting, reviewing, and selecting educational session presentations, coordinating, scheduling of those sessions, and assigning them into slots. There's a lot of collaboration between educational sessions and small group facilitation in particular, as the small group facilitation process also will be scheduling sessions throughout the conference. And they are charged with creating spaces for small group dialogue that builds on other conference content. Our assessment committee will be working to review past assessment, develop pre-conference and post-conference assessment practices, feedback on educational sessions from both participants and presenters. And then again, and then the leadership team provides overall vision, strategic directions, ensuring communication between subcommittees, so facilitating that process or providing advising on navigating things as they come up. We'll be coordinating and communicating with keynote speakers and managing overall conference logistics. Overall, I'm hoping for a focus on teamwork, community building, and getting the job done. I talked a little bit already about the competitive application process, and my own reflection from my past years on the committee is that what we put in is what we get out of it. I had an amazing small group committee experience last year, and I think it was really because we had great calls. Folks were on the calls, and we used our time productively to like share ideas and build a rapport with each other, so that when we met, it was the first time that I'd met a couple of folks, but we like walked up and hugged each other like we were family. And it was just amazing to finally be at that moment in LA last year and have had worked with folks for the whole year and be there on site to make it happen. So my hope is that sort of warmth and family environment is something that we're all met with when we're on site together as well. Okay, that was a lot. I'm gonna just check the time. We're at 12:30, which is great. Any questions so far about committee and subcommittee overview? Okay. So we have about 15 to 20-ish minutes to have some larger group discussion, which is great because I can stop talking at everyone for that amount of time. So I want us to think about like if we had a blank slate. We know that we're going to have about 12 hours total for the undergraduate student conference, starting at 8 a.m.-ish, ending at 5 p.m.-ish. I'm wondering about what are ways that we can think about, like what are creative and meaningful ways to engage undergraduate students who are interested in higher ed and student affairs if we have these 12 hours. So this can include types of sessions, it can include pedagogical styles to think about, it can include themes that we want to bring up. So again, blank slate, we've got 12 hours and we have our committee charge. What are some ideas or thoughts that folks have about how to use that time?
I was thinking, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was thinking something like how you mentioned exploratory, career-based, but then also touching on how they can be agents of change in those spaces. So maybe highlighting the overall career aspects within higher ed, student affairs, breaking that down into residence life and all those different offices, and how, if you desire to be in that position, how that position can help create change for, or be an agent of change for the institution.
That's great. Thanks.
I was reflecting on a note that you made from last year is about checking our assumptions related to how students are coming in and their interest and their involvement in student affairs. I think it'd be nice to do something around narrative or storytelling at the beginning so that we can check those assumptions and get an understanding of the students, like, what is your story? What interests you about the field? And it would be really interesting if we did it in something, I don't know, more modern, like something around digital storytelling or something that's a little bit more modern, although that's a pedagogy I'm not very familiar with, but I thought something around narrative, but in a unique, interesting way.
And then just to piggyback off of that storytelling, I think it would be great for professionals to also have that storytelling, because there's not one avenue to higher ed or student affairs. I know for me personally, I got in this avenue because I couldn't find a job and ended up as a secretary institution, and then loved being in higher ed. And so like, this is what I want to do. How come I didn't know this all along? So I think even having professionals in the field share their stories of how they happened upon student affairs, so that they don't think that there's only one avenue to get there.
From the storytelling part for the professionals, like if we wanted to do it from the committee perspective and small group facilitators, I think maybe in the welcome we could have recorded ourselves like explaining why we got into it or what our story is, and played that in the beginning, because I feel like that sets the tone for them, like what we would want them to do. So I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I love this idea around storytelling and how to really make this space feel a little bit more comfortable, as well, and to build. What I'm hearing is also like a focus on connections and getting to know folks, which I think I believe we can do it, right? I am an introvert, and so the idea of like making a ton of like really great friends in a day and a half sometimes feels really intimidating to me. And yet student affairs has taught me that it is possible. And so I think, Amber, the point you brought up around like how we can also utilize our small groups to build those kinds of spaces to feel comfortable for folks to do narrative sharing is a really great point. What are other ways that we can think about, like, that are creative and meaningful to engage undergrad students who are interested in exploring this career path?
I think something that we could do is looking at like lunchtime, like TED Talk almost, in that when folks are eating lunch, we could play a video like folks are already saying, where someone's talking about maybe like a topic or an area that students, maybe a gap year. And that's just a video that's playing where someone's talking about their experience with a gap year. So again, telling your story. But also I think it connects the students to someone in that space who might have done what they would like to do or might have done what they're interested in, so that way they can have those follow-up conversations or even build that connection that lasts beyond the conference. So just utilizing like our lunchtime just to maybe play a video or a 5-minute segment and hear someone's story in a TED Talk kind of fashion.
Right.
Something else we can explore to do is trying to engage them before. So maybe like some of these stories, like once a week leading up to the conference, when we're like 4 weeks out, we send them a new one, or we figure out other ways to give them information or kind of get them excited and thinking about it. Because I think that sometimes when they get there too, this is a little overwhelming because how we've talked about, some people don't know what they want to do. This is the first time they're really learning like hardcore about student affairs. So if you kind of get them thinking beforehand, so maybe they'll feel they're a little bit more prepared to tell their story or talk about things that they're kind of uncomfortable with, that could also be something that gets them excited for this experience.
Are there topics or like sort of frameworks that would be helpful for us to consider as we're developing the conference vision?
I like the idea of tracks also potentially for the educational sessions, because I know we were talking about how our students that are coming to the conference come with different experience levels, different levels of understanding about the field. So allowing them to explore maybe the field from an introductory level, or if it's someone who already knows, I want to go to grad school and I am looking for more professional development type stuff. So focusing our educational sessions with different tracks so that all students can get something out of it, and expand those conversations in the small groups. I know when I went to the undergraduate student conference, my small group was very helpful in terms of pushing the conversation forward and reflecting from what we learned in the educational session. So either tracks by level of knowledge or maybe different themes could be interesting to explore.
I also think something that we could do could be like a round table almost, where like we almost like it looks like kind of like a career fair, or almost like a fair where students are able to go and engage with professionals at the tables, or even grad students at the tables, based on maybe functional area, or like the grad school search process, or whatever we deem to be those table talk kind of conversations, where folks can connect that way, and just get more information about like what it is that we do, or what it is that they could be doing in our area.
I think it could be really cool to also like bring in current topics in higher ed at the time of the conference, so then the students can actually like talk about it and pretend they are going to solve it, so they can kind of get a taste of how being a professional is like, and explore how it's going to be different than just being a student leader at their current situation.
This is all great, and I think I am enjoying seeing a mix of like big picture sorts of framework ideas, as well as tangible, functional sorts of things that will help us reach those like the big picture ideas. And I think these are some great things to start with, and we'll have more ideas also as we continue in this development process. But what I'm seeing through this is that it's important both to have a space for students to share and to do some self-work, as well as really like learn functional areas, right? And learn specific like step-by-step things when it comes to applying to grad school perhaps, or considering like, do you want to go to grad school? Do you want to maybe look for a full-time position first? That kind of thing. And that there's a need for both of those types of educational opportunities through this conference. Anything else anyone wants to add to this part before we move on to the next question?
I would say it would be great for us to highlight burnout of being a new professional, knowing when to say yes, knowing when to say no, really putting those boundaries even as a new professional in higher ed, wanting to get those experience, but also stressing self-care.
Yes. That's great. I also, I recognize that I say this as chair, but I really do mean this genuinely as like just a suggestion or idea. Something that I have been grappling with a lot, I think just since I started my career, is really figuring out, let me see if I can put this into words. I think around the unpacking the concept of professionalism, but really from a place of what is it like, how to impact change and how to live by a certain set of values, knowing that certain things are also expected of like quote unquote professional behavior, or being like a representative of an institution. So how to leverage your seat at the table, I guess, and how to get to a place where other change is possible. That's just something I've been thinking a lot about and figuring out. Outside of my work in higher ed and student affairs, I'm also a community organizer. And so I'm constantly trying to reflect on ways to bring in the work I'm doing as a community organizer with you know, my work in the ivory tower as well. And so that is something that I think is a framing question for me, and something that we might be able to do something innovative and creative around when it comes to thinking through like activism in higher ed and roles as community organizers as well. If that is something that folks are interested in unpacking, recognizing that different folks have different motivations for this career. Okay, moving on to question B, which if folks want to jump back, that's fine. So part B, we can expect that students who are attending the undergrad student conference will have an interest in higher ed and student affairs, that either they're like diehard, like they know in their heart that this is like what they want to do for the rest of their lives. And they're like, I'm ready to go to grad school immediately, get me started on coursework right now. Or I actually don't know what this conference, I don't know what higher ed and student affairs is. I haven't committed to anything. I'm exploring a few different options. So what would a shared space for these students or students who fall somewhere in between look like in terms of sessions to develop, or what sort of culture we want to create within the conference, knowing that folks come in with a really wide variety of expectations?
I think last year something that went well, and Sean, you can let me know if you feel different because you were over this group, but we were going back and forth whether or not we wanted to have a returner only group or mix them amongst the rest of the students. I think the returner only group was helpful because it kind of addressed how we're saying that like they know about what they want to do a little bit, or they have like more of a understanding of what they can get out of this conference versus mixing them in with everybody else. So I think that that's already one good thing that can help with this, because we know where the returners are at versus everybody coming in together.
Right.
I think it would also be interesting to maybe tap into some of those returners for that peer-to-peer interaction and that peer-to-peer education almost, to see if there's any opportunity for them to share their experiences, you know, as those diehard student affairs fans who know they want to go to grad school or pursue a full-time job, to have them share their experiences as well. I think that would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think more on like, I guess, the logistical or framing end of like the moment that any messaging goes out regarding this conference should be inclusive in that nature, because I think it could be kind of jarring, or students might think this is not for me based on how we're messaging the conference. So you have a unique way where whether you're interested or not, this could be something for you to explore more. And then once they get there, framing in the beginning, whether it's for Raj or just all of us as a committee, and Amber, as you're leading the small groups, facilitators, like the framing should be, this is not just for one type of student, like all students.
I think it would also be being intentional with how are we trying to convey like what higher ed looks like. I know that when I attended the undergraduate conference, I had a mentor who was really invested in NASPA and really provided me with those experience. But then there was other individuals who just found out by their supervisor and something like, hey, there's a conference local, go and attend. But engaging with those individuals who didn't necessarily have like a mentor was really like eye-opening to me, to kind of see again this idea of like what the professionalism looks like, and this idea of mentorship, like intentional mentorship, because it also I think highlights that peer interaction. And I think if we could talk about what that looks like, we could get into really good discussions also, because like in grad programs you're also going to have people who have had those experiences, who did NODA as an undergrad or other internships, and then you have the other spectrum who just got into a program because they really wanted to do social justice work. And how do those two different experiences interact with each other to be beneficial on both sides, if that makes sense?
I think that, as someone who's been thinking about this question a lot, just from previous USC involvement, Jesus, I think your last question of how do you get these two worlds to coexist is really important. I used to think about this from the how do we get the students who aren't interested yet to that point where the students who are very interested, how do we get them to that level? And it really isn't about that, right? I think it's very much so. I think the students who are coming in as diehards have as much to gain as the students who don't really have a sense of what student affairs is yet. I think one of the challenges that I see our fields having is that, you know, as much as there is really good mentoring happening, I think that a lot of people force students to go into student affairs by saying, oh, you're a really good student leader, you should do this, and really force students into that. And I think for those students, being able to have other experiences and hearing other narratives, you know, where that isn't the solid mentoring that they're getting or that isn't the solid supervision that they're getting is really important. And I think the space can very much so allow students to learn that.
Okay, conference calls are full of awkward silences, but I think what Jimmy said there is really important for us to think about as we move forward too, is how do we prioritize all of the needs of our participants equally and recognize that everyone has something to gain, and that we're not really, I think part of this process is constant reflection about, as we're developing the conference, as we're doing selections about ed sessions and small group facilitators, and developing our assessment practices and reaching out in terms of marketing, basically like who is this serving and who could we potentially be missing based on the messages, both explicit and implicit, that we're giving out as well. I think that's going to be a constant reflection point and process, but that will ultimately make us stronger through it as well. Something that I'm really appreciating that folks are saying on the call, I think I'm hearing a lot of folks tapping into like your own personal experience and your own stories of what brought you into this field, maybe what you've grappled with. And I hope that we can continue to focus on that and think about that, because ultimately, like, these folks are where we once were at some point. And, you know, within our committee, we don't capture all of those narratives, but the truth that we've lived will inform the kind of experience that we're creating. And so I hope that folks will continue to kind of reflect on individual experiences or things that you've learned or heard from other folks and channel that into this conference planning process in ways that doesn't necessarily just recreate the schema of what we think a conference could be or should be. I noticed that we have about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to finish a couple of minutes early in case folks have something right at the hour mark. So is there anything anyone else wants to add to this section of vision building or thoughts before we move forward? And again, this is just the first of many conference or like calls about this. So if you come up with an idea later, that's great. This is sort of our warm up.
I appreciate this warm up.
Well, thank you. Okay, so moving forward with the conference planning timeline, we're in late August right now. So within about a month, we'll have our outcomes and like major big picture concepts finalized by the end of September. October, we're going to start doing some marketing and recruitment. So we will ideally be opening registration as well as the call for programs. Registration will be marketing, recruitment, and registration, and then the call for programs will come out of the educational sessions subcommittee. In November, we're sort of continuing with all of that work, again, pushing marketing, pushing other subcommittee work that's coming out. In December, we will have small group facilitators, ed session presenters, and keynote speakers finalized. So the reason for that, the December deadline, I think even that might be a little bit late for some folks, but it's really realistic. But it's important that before we break for holidays in December, folks kind of know if they need to be somewhere in 3 months. And so that's why we're on that deadline is, these are all hard, right? So by December, we will have all of our conference volunteers set. One of my favorite things about USC is how many people have the opportunity to be involved. And I love that I think sometimes folks feel like an organization such as large as NASPA can be hard to navigate, hard to feel access to, and it's great that we can welcome so many folks who have not had involvement in the past but who want to be. So that is in December. In January, we will have our conference schedule finalized. Ed sessions will be assigned to different slots, so folks will also be able to know kind of when they're presenting. Around that time, we will also start implementing assessment practices. So if we want to start thinking about developing a pre-conference assessment at that time that we can implement as folks start to register. And then depending on the assessment committee's vision, we can also start thinking about if like presenters or participants also need to be filling out other assessment sorts of documents. February, we're like rolling. So these are our final preparations. We'll do some final communications. There may be some things that we need to coordinate with the NASPA central office in terms of collecting information for the app or the conference booklet, things like that. But we're really just finalizing things at that point. And then March is going to be here before we know it. And we'll be on site in Austin, ready to eat some good barbecue and hang out. So as you are developing your own travel plans, just remember that we should all be in Austin by Friday afternoon. We'll spend some time together that Friday evening, and then the conference starts very early on Saturday morning. And then after the conference, we'll have a couple of meetings to do some reflection, wrapping up conference assessment. So that's our timeline. Our next steps are going to be, I've asked each of the subcommittee leads to schedule a one-on-one call with me sometime between now and the next large committee call. And then your subcommittee leads will be reaching out to you to plan a committee call. Ideally before the next call, but I understand crunch time and schedules can be hard. So ideally before the next call, if not sometime right around then, which is on September 12th is the next one, September 11th or 12th. And then if everyone could fill out the committee info Google Doc that is linked in the form, I'd really appreciate it. It's so that I can give everyone access to our Google Drive, which is how we organize information. And then I'm gonna work on setting up a listserv as well, and an email list in case folks need that. Any questions about any of this, about the timeline or of next steps?
Not about the timeline, but just overall, like how do we know like how many undergraduate students we're potentially bringing on to the conference or accepting?
Colleen, would you be able to help with that question?
Sure. So last year we capped the registration at 180, which was our total, and we went a little bit over that. I think we were at like 183 or 186 with some on-site registrations, but given the space that we were utilizing at the University of Southern California last year, that was kind of where we were capped. This year we may be able to go over that a little bit, kind of depending on what our space availabilities are. But in previous years, we've kind of aimed between that like sort of 150 and 200 students. I don't think we've ever got as many as 200, but we've gotten pretty close in previous years.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Thanks, Colleen. All right, everyone. Thank you again so much for making time for this call in such a busy time. I'm so excited to continue the calls, and I hope everyone has a really great week. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or anything, and I will see you all soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.